Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. This time we're going to be checking out something that a listener sent in.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's a resource for teaching energy to primary school students.
Okay.
It's called Energy Pendulum Model for Primary, and it's from a website called Open Educational Resources / Open Source Physics at Singapore.
Catchy.
It is a catchy name, and what really caught my eye was that it uses an interactive simulation,
Oh, neat.
which I think is a really cool way to get young kids excited about physics.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's certainly a different approach than what a lot of us grew up with.
Exactly.
The static diagrams and the textbook explanations.
Yeah, like I remember just reading about this stuff and just
Yeah.
not really getting it.
Yeah, not being able to really visualize it.
Yeah, and speaking of visualizing it, there's an embedded interactive pendulum model right on the page.
Oh, wow.
You can actually play around with the simulation yourself.
That's awesome.
The link is right there. It's https://iwant2study.org, Glucan JS02, Newtonian mechanics, 7 energy work power, JS model, SHMX Vapendulum free S, HMX Vapendulum Pradera simulation, .xhtml.
Okay.
So what do you think about using something like this for primary school students?
I think it's amazing, instead of, like you were saying, just being told how a pendulum works,
Right.
you can actually manipulate the variables
Yeah.
and see the effects in real time,
Right.
which is really cool for someone at that age.
Absolutely.
It really encourages you to experiment
Mhm.
and helps you to develop a more intuitive understanding of the underlying physics.
Exactly. It's one thing to read about potential and kinetic energy,
Right.
but seeing it in action,
Yes.
seeing that transformation as the pendulum swings, that's
Mhm.
got to be so much more engaging for them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it really takes those concepts off the page and makes them tangible,
Yeah,
you know?
for sure.
Now, the webpage itself doesn't explicitly state the learning goals,
Okay.
but it's pretty clear that the simulation is designed to introduce these students to fundamental ideas about energy at a very, basic level.
And there's so much more to explore on this webpage. I mean, I
Right.
noticed a ton of links
Really?
to additional resources,
Like what?
like teacher guides, student worksheets, even research papers.
Wow.
It's like a whole ecosystem built around this simulation.
You've hit on something really important there. This website is a great example of what we call Open Educational Resources, or OERs.
OERs. Now, that's something I'm really interested in. Could
Okay.
you explain what those are for our listeners who might not be familiar?
Sure. OERs are essentially educational materials that are freely available for anyone to use, adapt, and share.
Okay.
They're often licensed in a way that allows for modification and redistribution, which can be a game changer for educators,
Mhm.
especially those who might not have access to expensive textbooks or other resources.
So it's not just about making things free. It's about giving people the freedom to use and build upon those resources.
Precisely.
Oh.
And that can lead to incredible collaboration and innovation in the education space.
Oh.
Now, one specific link that caught my eye was a project titled Understanding Teacher Learning Community as Support for Implementation of Open Source Physics for Conceptual Instruction.
Yeah, I saw that one too. It's
Yeah.
at http://welookhang.blogspot.sg21507 understanding-teacher-learning.html.
Okay.
It seems really interesting, but I wasn't sure how it connected to the pendulum simulation.
Well, that project likely explores how teachers are using and adapting the simulation and other open source physics resources in their classrooms.
Okay.
It highlights the real-world application of OERs and the importance of understanding how these tools are being integrated into actual teaching practices.
So it's not just about developing these amazing resources, but also about supporting the educators who are actually using them with their students.
Exactly. There's a human element to this that's often overlooked.
Right.
We need to consider the challenges teachers face when implementing new approaches and find ways to support their professional development in this area.
That makes a lot of sense. I imagine there are a lot of insights to be gained from studying how teachers are adapting these open source physics materials, what's working well, and what challenges they're encountering.
Absolutely. It's through that kind of research and collaboration
Yeah.
that we can truly maximize the potential of OERs to transform education.
Wow, so we've covered a lot of ground already just on this one webpage.
We have.
It's amazing how much there is to unpack here.
It is.
And we're just getting started.
I know.
This is going to be fun.
It is.
It's fascinating to think about like all the different people that something like this could help. I mean,
Yeah.
we're talking about changing the way that physics is taught.
Right. And, another aspect of OERs that we should probably mention
Yeah, what's that?
is the potential benefits for students who might not have access to traditional learning materials.
That's a really good point. I mean, not everyone has the means to buy, expensive textbooks or software.
Right.
So how do OERs kind of level the playing field, so to speak?
Well, imagine a student in a rural community or maybe someone who is facing financial hardship.
Yeah.
OERs would provide them with access to the same high-quality learning materials as someone attending a well-funded school.
Interesting.
So it removes those financial barriers
Hmm.
and opens up opportunities that might not have existed otherwise.
So OERs are about more than just saving money. They're about, you know, educational equity.
Precisely.
Okay.
And for educators, OERs can provide a vast library of resources that can be tailored to their specific teaching styles and curriculum needs.
Okay.
They're not locked into a particular textbook or teaching method. They have the flexibility to adapt and customize,
That's pretty cool.
which can be really empowering.
Yeah, I can imagine that.
Yeah.
It's like having a giant toolbox
Right.
full of different teaching strategies and materials all ready to be, adapted and used in creative ways.
Exactly.
It must be so liberating for teachers who are really passionate about, finding the best ways to reach their students.
Absolutely. And it encourages a culture of sharing and collaboration among educators. Instead of everyone working in isolation, they can draw on this collective pool of knowledge and experience,
Mm-hmm.
which benefits everyone.
Now, speaking of, all the legal details,
Mhm.
I did notice at the bottom of the webpage that the content is licensed under the Creative Commons Attribution Share Alike 4.0 Singapore license
Okay.
with separate commercial use guidelines for the Easy JavaScript Simulations library.
Oh, wow.
Can you break down what all that means?
Yeah, licensing is an important aspect of OERs, and this particular license allows anyone to use, adapt, and even share their modified versions of the simulation, even for commercial purposes.
Okay.
But the key condition is that they attribute the original creators and share any adaptations under the same license terms.
So it ensures that the original creators get credit,
Right.
but it also encourages a sort of pay-it-forward approach where everyone contributes to this growing pool of educational resources.
Exactly.
That's neat.
And those separate guidelines for this Easy JavaScript Simulations library are there to protect the intellectual property of the developers who created the underlying technology.
Okay.
It strikes a balance between encouraging open use and ensuring the sustainability of the platform itself.
So a lot of thought went into crafting those licensing terms to make sure that everyone benefits from this very open approach to education.
Absolutely. It's
Mm.
about fostering a healthy ecosystem where both the creators and the users of OERs can thrive.
Okay, so I'm starting to see just how impactful this energy pendulum model for primary really is. I mean, it's not just a cool simulation, it's kind of a gateway to a whole new way of thinking about teaching and learning.
It really is, and it makes you wonder what the future holds for educational resources like this.
It was just thinking the same thing. Like, imagine if this kind of interactive, engaging approach was applied to other subjects.
Yeah.
We touched on history and language learning, but what about something like music?
Yeah.
Could you have an interactive simulation that lets you experiment with different instruments and musical concepts?
Absolutely. Imagine a virtual orchestra where you could change the tempo or instrumentation,
Oh, wow.
or even compose your own melodies.
That would be amazing.
The possibilities are truly endless when you start to think about how technology can create these immersive, engaging learning environments.
It's like we're on the verge of a revolution in education, where technology is being used not just to deliver information, but to create these incredible immersive learning experiences.
And what's really exciting is that these technologies are becoming more accessible than ever before.
Oh, that's great.
We're seeing more and more open source tools and platforms that empower educators to create their own interactive content, even without extensive technical expertise.
Okay.
It's a truly democratizing force in education.
So this energy pendulum model for primary might be just a glimpse of what's to come. It represents a shift in thinking, a move towards more active, engaging, and personalized learning experiences.
I think you're right, and it raises a really interesting question. How can we best support teachers as they navigate this new landscape?
That's something I've been wondering about too. It's one thing to have access to these amazing tools, but it's another thing entirely to know how to integrate them effectively into a classroom setting.
Exactly. It comes back to that research project we mentioned earlier about teacher learning communities.
Right.
Understanding the challenges teachers face, providing them with the training and resources they need, and fostering a sense of community where they can share best practices. These are all crucial elements in ensuring the success of this shift toward more open and interactive learning.
It's really exciting to think about the future of education and the role that resources like this pendulum simulation can play. this single web page has like opened up so many possibilities for education. It's crazy.
It really has, and I think it would be really valuable to actually take a look at that research project on teacher learning communities.
Yeah, sure.
What are the specific challenges teachers face when implementing these kinds of open source physics resources?
Yeah.
What kind of support do they need to be successful?
Yeah, I agree. We've talked a lot about, the potential benefits, but it's important to understand the real-world experiences of the educators who are actually using these tools in their classrooms.
Right. I mean, think about it. Those insights could help us figure out how to better support teachers
Yeah.
and make sure they have the resources and the training they need to make the most of these innovative approaches.
Okay, so let's recap what we've learned about this energy pendulum model for primary. It's a fantastic example of an interactive simulation that brings the concepts of potential and kinetic energy to life. And it's freely available thanks to the Open Educational Resources movement,
Yeah, quite.
which is all about making these high-quality learning materials accessible to everyone.
And we can't forget about all those additional resources on the webpage, like the teacher guide student worksheets, and even those research papers. It's not just a standalone simulation. It's part of a larger ecosystem of resources that supports both the teachers and the students.
It's got me thinking about how this approach to learning could be applied to other subjects. I mean, we touched on history and language learning, but what about something like music?
Hmm.
Could you have an interactive simulation that lets you experiment with different instruments and musical concepts?
Absolutely. I mean, imagine like a virtual orchestra where you could change the tempo or instrumentation or even compose your own melodies.
Whoa, that's so cool.
Yeah,
The possibilities really are limitless when you start to think about how technology can create these immersive, engaging learning environments.
right.
It's really inspiring to think about the future of education and how these kinds of resources could like completely transform the way we learn. I mean, it's not just about memorizing facts anymore.
Right.
It's about actively like exploring and experimenting with these ideas.
And making it a more personal and engaging
Yeah.
experience. By tailoring the learning environment to individual needs and interests, we can really tap into each student's unique potential.
I'm really glad we did this deep dive.
You too.
This has given me a lot to think about.
And for you listening, we encourage you to check out the Energy Pendulum Model for primary and see for yourself how engaging and insightful this type of interactive learning can be, and maybe you'll even be inspired to explore how similar tools could be applied to your own areas of interest.
Until next time, keep diving deep.